Hello, and welcome to the CoStar News Hotels podcast. I'm Natalie Harms, reporter for CoStar News, and today I'm joined by Olaf Belgraver, head of chains at Booking.com. Olaf, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Natalie.
Well, you know this, but I originally reached out to you earlier this summer because I caught a presentation by you on traveler trends. So I think the presentation was based on Booking.com data, but it was fascinating. You kicked off with talking about just how much the industry is growing, specifically to become a $16 trillion industry by 2034. So just to start, what are the factors that are driving that growth?
Yeah, it's interesting to see that the travel industry is growing faster than overall GDP. So the share of total GDP projections are that it's going to grow from 10% to 11.5%. So that's quite significant in the coming years. Um, I think some of the biggest drivers for this growth is that it is first and foremost one of the top spending priorities. When you look at the five biggest travel markets around the globe, which are the US, the UK, Germany, China, and India, all five of them, based on a travel survey that was done, they all indicate that travel is the biggest spending priority for them. And if you look at those five countries, today they represent about 34% of the total travel market. And by 2040, we expect that that will expand to 42%. And that's mainly driven by the middle class growth because the GDP per capita is growing, which means that the middle class, so the category that spends a lot on travel, is also expanding quite significantly. And that's going to be a big driver of that growth. The top five will continue to be the top five, but they will represent a much bigger share of the total volume.
Yeah. And are we talking about international, domestic? Are both of those kind of verticals growing?
Yeah, they're both growing. If you look at international travelers worldwide, it's already at around 1.3 billion, and that's projected to grow at a 7% compound annual growth rate through 2034. That's based on some of the data that we got from the World Economic Forum. Domestic is a little bit harder to say because it very much depends on the market, but we did do a travel research in the US with US travelers specifically, which I also spoke about recently at a conference, is that among those US travelers, 65%, so about two-thirds, are indicating that they prefer to travel domestically. The main reasons for that is that it's easier and it's also expected to be cheaper or less expensive, according to about half of them. Um, Apart from that, what we've also heard from them is that they don't expect any language barriers when they travel domestically, and they don't have any visa requirements. And as you may know, that we've only recently surpassed the 50% mark of US travelers or US citizens that hold a passport. So that's also meaning that they travel a lot domestically rather than international.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has been a very interesting year so far, which might be an understatement about 2025. But I wonder from your perspective, what are kind of the biggest headlines of the year so far when it comes to travel industry and growth?
Yeah, there's a lot happening. First and foremost, macroeconomic shifts. There's a lot happening around the world globally. We also see that the complexity around regulatory compliance is getting bigger. Consumer spending behavior and how they look at their travel planning is changing quite a lot as well. And then one of the biggest paradigm shifts we see at the moment is the rise of generative AI, which is also having a big impact on the travel industry as a whole.
And we are definitely going to talk about some AI a little later. But I guess kind of comparing that to we're pretty much at the midpoint of the year. What does the rest of the year look like? Are we going to ride some of these same trends? Do you feel like there's going to be a turn?
Yeah, I think the trend is going to continue until the end of this year. Macroeconomically, definitely. I mean, things don't change rapidly. There, the regulatory complexity that we have is something that will continue to expand. We are an international industry. There's a lot of cross-country or inter-country travel. That means there's multiple jurisdictions that apply. That'll continue to become more and more complicated. Tax regulations are going to continue to become more complex. Consumer behavior, just briefly, we see specific changes generationally. looking at millennials and Gen Z, they look at social media a lot more for their travel than the other generations. For them, it's about a third, and for Gen Z and millennials, it's almost two-thirds that use social media for their travel planning. And generative AI is just going to exponentially grow.
Mhm. Yeah, for social media and the power of that, like, I think we just kind of think about it abstractly. Like, yes, people are using social media to explore new destinations, and it's like kind of is it activating more travelers? Is it opening the door for more travelers in that way?
I think it's more a shift in behavior on how people decide on their travel,
Okay.
as in where do they want to go, what do they want to do, what are some of the activities. So, if you look at Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok, which are the most used social media channels for travel planning, they're really that top bracket. The next generation is highly influenceable, and those trends can go viral very quickly. I live in Amsterdam, and the local sandwich store that has pretty average sandwiches, just because an influencer was there, there's huge queues out on the street. And that's also true for travel destination. Whatever becomes very popular within those social media channels is also going to drive a lot of volume into those destinations.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I think about that flip it on the other side, not the consumer experience, but the actual, destination experience, how so much can change in a second. And,
Yeah.
from hotels, especially, got to be ready for that viral moment. I don't even know how you prepare for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's hard to prepare. It's unpredictable. I think it's essential just to stay aware of those shifts and what are
Mhm.
those trends to make sure that you can anticipate if you have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the shift from kind of more traditional booking kind of processes uh, to AI is has been pretty interesting, and I think for the most part, the industry is just aware of it happening and growing. But what's actually happening today versus when you originally presented a couple months ago and even earlier this year?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest changes is that people have become relatively easily and relatively quickly adjusted to AI, and different generations are now starting to use it. It's not a generational thing, and people put a lot of trust in AI and in the recommendations that it gives, which is quite interesting to see. Um, it's one of the biggest shifts that we see currently in travel since the internet, and people are becoming more and more comfortable with using it, and that also means that expectations will increase regarding the potential AI gives them to simplify their lives and how they look at travel. Um, we recently released the Global AI Sentiment Report, which is looking at insights that we've drawn from 37,000 people across the globe in 33 different countries, to see how people are using, trusting, and responding to AI in their everyday life and travel. And what's interesting there is that we already see that almost 90% of them want to use AI in future travel planning. AI assistants are considered a more trusted source than travel bloggers or social media influencers. So what I just said was true about social media. That's good. That's already being overtaken by AI. And more than 90% of all the respondents that we interviewed say that they're very excited about it. And 80% are claiming that they're familiar with the technology, although there's some different levels across the different regions globally. Um, we at Booking, obviously, we're doing a lot to make sure that we can integrate all the benefits that AI has to offer in our operations, um, targeting both the customers, our partners, as well as internal cost efficiencies that we believe that we can make by the use of AI.
Yeah, it's a great point because there's maybe kind of 2 revolutions happening within AI within travel because it's the consumer experience, which is fascinating, and then there's the using AI, on the business side and allowing, all the different types of companies within the travel industry to optimize their operations. Just kind of digging a little deeper into the consumer side of things because you said something earlier, about consumers trusting AI. Is it good that they're trusting this? Like, I feel like just personally, sometimes the AI, and I won't name specific names that I've used to just like try to see what it's like to ask AI some questions about travel, not necessarily come in with completely accurate information. So I just wonder what your thoughts on are about that.
Yeah, my thoughts there from a personal level on my recent trip is also that it doesn't always give exactly what you want it to give, right? So the prompt that you give is super important, and I think that's where all of us need still a lot of education to make sure that we can use AI as best as we can. But it is interesting that people still trust it and still try and enhance their prompts and continue their questions and do something with the answers that they are getting. Um, Also looking further ahead, if you think about it, generative AI is one thing, but agentic AI is going to be the next big thing, where AI is going to be acting on our behalf, and maybe not always necessarily with our human input. That means that they could be rebooking flights if there's disruptions, or adjusting our itineraries, and taking all the end-to-end steps without us necessarily having to intervene. And that's something that we really need to somehow prepare for, and that's still quite complex on how we do it. So looking at the traveler specifically, it's a shift on how everybody's doing business. But I think already many accommodations and many of the players in the industry recognize the potential benefits of AI for our businesses. Um, what I also think is important is that you need to have the right expertise. And depending if you're a very large company, that can be in-house. But if you're a smaller company, I think it's good to hire the right expertise to make sure that as a business, you can adjust to it and benefit from it. And
Yeah,
it's not this big, scary, untouchable thing.
no, I heard a lot about the shift from kind of SEO optimization to GEO optimization, right? So that is a big thing. They are not necessarily the same thing. There's probably some overlap in getting GEO optimized, but that is very interesting. And what's funny is my follow-up question to you was going to be about where is the at least the consumer experience with AI going? And you're saying it's going to this, we're using it now to learn about destinations and maybe where to book a hotel stay at particular places, but we're not actually booking through AI. But that is on the horizon, you're saying.
I think that's on the horizon, definitely. Also, besides being able to decide where you want to go, I think it's also a big opportunity for companies to use AI to personalize some of the answers that you're giving. So, from a customer service point of view, or the way you operate your website, AI can really make sure that what is being put in front of a consumer is what they are looking for and tailored to their personal needs, because you start to build up more of a profile of people and be able to tailor to that more specifically. And it becomes much more conversational without necessarily having a human that is there to interact.
Definitely revolutionary types of changes. So, and I know you talked a little bit about how on the non-consumer side of the industry, we can prepare for this, and it's tapping the right resources to get your websites ready, to get your workforce ready. Any other kind of tips for integrating AI into your business?
Yeah, it's the cost efficiency, I think, is a big one as well, to see what are some of the operations you are doing within your company that you might be able to automate or use AI to do smarter. So it's the interactions with the traveler, the service you provide to your partners, which is relevant for us, to automate that through AI and to make it more personalized. And then the third piece is the internal efficiencies using artificial intelligence.
Well, I think I want to go back to something you said early on about more and more consumers prioritizing travel. And you talked about the growth of the middle class from the business perspective, from all of the companies involved in the travel industry. How do they make sure they're taking advantage of this opportunity of this growing middle class internationally? More people want to travel. How do people make sure that they pick their destinations and their um, locations?
I think firstly, it's good to realize that this is happening and that the middle class is growing. India would be a market that I would recommend to pay close attention to. If you look at the projections that are made, it's expected to overtake Germany in terms of size. So if you are a company targeting travelers to come to your properties, I would very much recommend to make sure India is part of your plan. It's also true for the other markets. So China, US, UK, and Germany are still going to be very big, but India seems to be the one that's the most exponentially growing. And there's a number of new entrants that we see as well in that top 15 list of countries that is going to be growing quite significantly. You've got Pakistan, for example, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Brazil. They're all new entrants into that top 15 list of countries where travel is going to be much bigger than it is today.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great intel. And just to kind of wrap up, obviously we cover hotels and OTAs are a huge part of the hotel booking industry. And I wonder if you can kind of talk a little bit about how hotels can prepare for this new age of travel and maybe at the same time how OTAs are preparing.
Maybe to yeah, to wrap it up a bit on the four key areas that I touched upon, right? On the macroeconomic level, there's a lot happening around us. There's wars, there's conflicts, which I think are first and foremost a humanitarian issue, not a business one. But we are expected to navigate it. And yeah, my suggestion would be is to um, influence what you can control and try and deal with what you cannot control. There's a number of shifting behaviors there in terms of where people go and how they travel, but people still travel, right?
Hmm.
So people might not choose the same destinations or choose to travel domestically, stay shorter, spend less, look for safety, but they will continue to travel, and I think it's good to be aware of that. Um, Same for regulatory complexity. It's working closely with all your partners to navigate it and collaborate. It's something that affects the whole industry. It affects us as an OTA, but it also affects all of our partners. And it's something where we really need to closely work together to make sure that we get to the right outcome and all stay compliant. On the social media side, it's important to be aware of all the trends. I wouldn't go crazy about it. They are just that, trends, right?
Hmm.
So, but I do think it's important to be aware and yeah, adjust your marketing strategy accordingly. Where are you present? If you know that 60% of Gen Z and millennials use social media, make sure that you are there in the top four social media channels. And AI, I think the recommendation I have there is make sure you have access to the right expertise. If you're a large company, that can be in-house, but if not, work together with your partners, such as ourselves, or work together with some out-of-house AI expertise that you might be able to hire.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, a lot to think about. It sounds like it's such an exciting time to be a part of this industry. So I appreciate you for this conversation and for sharing all of this information.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Natalie.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the CoStar News Hotels podcast was recorded on August 14th, 2025 by Natalie Harms and edited by Rachel Dopp. Look for this and more at costar.com/hotel news and subscribe wherever you like to listen to your podcast.